Call the November 15th meeting of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners to order. Glad to see everyone here today. Hopefully this meeting will move along pretty smoothly. At this time, I will ask Commissioner Matthews to do the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Our Father, we do thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity we have to come and tend to the business of the county and to the citizens of this county. We thank you for the leadership that we have in our county government. We just pray that you would be with them as they go through their daily task. We thank you for the crisp, cool morning we have this morning and for the rain that's coming. We ask you'll be with us and help us to have a good day as we go through our meeting today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. Before we move forward, I want to say congratulations to Commissioner McCoy on her successful reelection, and also to Commissioner-elect Morris on his election. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Rouse.
Good morning. We've got another grant for our aging program through the Mid-Carolina agency. It's for $5,000. It'll be used to help with our Medicare decounseling throughout the year. We're in open enrollment right now, but these funds go from September through August of next year. So if we don't spend them, it'll be kind of like we did back after the budget was passed. I have to come back and we'll have to carry that little bit of money forward, but we plan to use it for Medicare decounseling. So that's what that $5,000 is for.
Any questions for Rouse? Okay, if the board's in agreement, we will add that to the consent agenda for Monday.
Thank you.
By the way, I failed to mention Commissioner Johnson is having a medical procedure this morning that if he'd have rescheduled it, it'd probably been a year before he could get it back. So he's not going to be with us today. Okay, Mr. Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members. Yes, sir. This is another resolution request from the NCDOT on some existing roads within a development, just to so that way they can proceed taking them into their system.
Anyone have any questions or concerns about this? All right. Madam Clerk, if you'll add that to the consent agenda, I'd appreciate it.
I sure will.
You want to go ahead and talk about?
Yeah, I'll just move right into our two upcoming items from Development Services, one rezoning and one land use amendment. We had a few of those this summer. This was actually submitted in July for the August meeting, and it got the applicant tabled it several months. It was finally heard at the November planning board meeting. I know we discussed a new update to the land use plan, and we also discussed a potential text amendment to that way we would see these maybe just twice a year. But at any rate, this is one that was already on the docket, and it just moved forward. So it's 26 acres in the Black River Township. They're on NC 210. Just before you get to James Norris Road, and right at North Harnett School Road. That would be the access for it. It's a land use amendment request from low density to medium density. It's very similar to the one that we saw in May, I believe it was. That was in the same vicinity. And these requests have come in because of the access to water and sewer. It's all zoned the same, as you can see there. Basically, again, the land use amendment, different land use classifications would allow them to kick into a different chapter to get different density bonuses. So the zoning, underlying zoning would stay the same. This is probably for single-family residential development. Per the application, that it says to assist in residential development while also preserving the environmentally sensitive areas of these two tracts. It's currently vacant. Of course, it's right there at North Harnett Primary School and some undeveloped areas. Again, it would be served by public water and sewer. 7,800 vehicle trips per day, approximately on 210. Right there at the school, there's about 90 car trips per day, and 9 school buses go in there twice a day. November 7th, the Planning Board voted unanimously to recommend denial of the land use amendment request based off of the existing medium density residential not being based off of the requested medium density residential not being adjacent to any of the parcels. It would be just basically a pocket of MDR in between all low density. Planning Board members discussed existing traffic and congestion issues during the AM and PM school drop-off hours and pickup hours, and also possibly looking at an alternative access point out on NC 210 if possible. The applicant stated the sole purpose is for residential development and the need to have flexible lot sizes due to environmental sensitive areas. No one spoke in opposition. Again, staff looked at it based off of the low density residential being all around it, as well as traffic concerns right there on the dead end school road. And then also just kind of looking at the previous case and those discussion points.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. Before we move forward, in an effort to be totally transparent and above board on this situation, I'm going to ask the board if they will recuse me from this matter. The J in G&J Development is a third cousin of mine, and while that's very distantly related, somebody will try to make something out of it at some point. So, and while I could refute many of the assumptions that were made by the planning board, I will ask to be recused.
This one. Good.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to recuse Chairman Weatherspoon or yourself from the zoning hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, on that, just as so we're on the same sheet of music here, it's okay to do it here in a work session. Obviously, you're not voting on it today. You'll be voting at that meeting, so I would think you would need to make that same motion and vote at the meeting itself when you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. This same motion will carry over to the upcoming meeting. It will carry over to any discussion about this property.
Granted, for the discussion today, but when it comes up for a vote, I would say you need to do another motion
Okay.
and second
Okay.
and vote on it at the regular voting meeting.
Okay.
That's pursuant to your Rule 21.
You get to run this.
Oh, the rest of us? Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Sykes?
I've got a
I'm
couple.
against it.
Sorry.
I'm gonna make it right up front. I vote no.
We're not voting yet. We haven't had a public hearing yet, but
Well, when the public hearing comes, I'm still gonna say no. I'm tired of seeing all these houses in this county coming up. People, after a while, you're not gonna be able to even move in this county. And we need to start concentrating on other things that'll benefit the citizens of this county. Jobs for one, affordable houses for one. So I know I'm out of order. Discuss, that's for the discussion, that's my discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Sykes, what, to move, if that were to move from low density to medium density, it's been requested. Can you give me a ballpark? How many lots would that be moving to from low to medium?
Yeah, yes, sir. We've even seen two designs, and it looks. No, we've seen several designs actually. Probably anywhere from 10 to 20 houses. Yeah, they could all. I think it's going to be the same product, but like I said, different density on the sides.
Right, okay. And on that, if we could go back to that, the map there, Melissa. Good, back up to the next one. Yeah, right there. So all this yellow then, where is the medium and the low here?
Yes, sir. The low is yellow, medium is orange, and blue is agricultural and rural residential.
Okay. So everything going north there, for the most part, then is low, and
Yes, sir.
down below is medium. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Yeah, that one, right, pretty much where the line or the yellow and orange are, that's the Aether Stone development, if you're familiar with that, right there on 210.
Right,
It's being built now.
gotcha. And the last thing I will say is, regardless of how this goes, we obviously have some serious traffic congestion in that area when school is taking in and when school is letting out. Only one entrance in and out of that primary school. I would hope that we work closely with DOT, because I'm sure there will have to be some road improvements no matter what development they put in there for turn lane or whatever, to maybe come up with some solution that might help rather than make it more difficult to get in and out of there during those school take in and let out times.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, this is something that we've been working on in this area for the last 3 to 4 years. And the problem was the traffic right there at that school. And it's, we were never able to remove the problem. So I think that the board evaluated all of this and looked at it, and I agree with the board. Because prior to you all coming to the board, this had come up, us trying to get an interest in and an interest out of that school area, on that property in that area. And it just never developed. People left the board, and I totally understand your explanation for the board voting against it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Okay, great, thank you. Next one is out in the Barbecue Township, right near 27 and Buffalo Lake Road area on the northern side of NC 27. It's a total of almost 23 acres, 22.8 acres. The request is to rezone a little over 8 acres from RA20 R2 commercial. There's a lot of commercial, obviously, on the south side of NC 27 there around existing gas station, car wash, ATM, ice machine, Dollar General, and so forth, even some undeveloped commercial land. Public water and public sewer would be utilized. It's a large rural center land use, commercial land use node in that area. There you can see it there on the aerial. And so the front part there would be rezoned to commercial, and the idea is in the very, very back is conservation. You can kind of see where the gray trees are. That's all conservation flood zone area. So the little schematic that's in the application is the front 8 acres would be commercial. They don't know if they would leave it one total large 8-acre parcel I think they've got into application a little sketch to where they could potentially get 3 or 4 lots. Then behind, they'd have a little bit of residential and then preserve the wetlands in the back. Planning board did vote unanimously to recommend approval. No one spoke in opposition. Actually, the citizen, no, a citizen did not even attend. And then staff recommended approval as well.
Any comments or questions about this rezoning?
I don't have any questions, but I will comment that I'm very familiar with this property here, and I think it would be ideal actually for us to put some commercial right there at that little, that corner of Buffalo Lake and 27. Let it build up a little bit more. We've got so many houses there, and if we can bring in some sort of retail or something there, another restaurant, hopefully. I mean, goodness gracious, we can use it out there. It'd be phenomenal. So,
Yeah, it's not very high density residential, so it's perfect for
Yeah.
For new commercial. So the curve's a little blind there, but I'd imagine they probably DOT would certainly look at that. Of course,
yeah,
with their
but
driveway.
you got a
permit.
decent stretch. I mean, as long as you move their entrance closer up towards Buffalo Lake Road, that you're past that curve.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Is this right across from Buffalo Lake Road?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you would keep
Sort of
going
diagonal.
Buffalo Lake
Is it-
Road where you tee it, it'll be off to the right a little.
From that existing convenience store?
There's a Dollar General, then there's an open lot that Pat Cameron and Bill Batten have. That's, I believe that's commercial as
Yep.
well.
Yeah,
right
right.
there on that corner, and it's directly across the street from that. So, if you're coming down Buffalo Lake Road and you're keying 27, imagine just keep driving straight.
That's right.
So, Mr. Nickel, you're saying that since there's already a Dollar General there, you won't have to worry about it being a Dollar General?
Well, maybe we'll get a Family Dollar across the street.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a problem with this being rezoned for commercial because it is a commercial area. And there, since we don't have natural gas and the things that we need to draw businesses and retail and all, that would be an ideal place. So I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? All right, we will have the public hearing on Monday then.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, Allie.
Good morning, commissioners and chairman. I'm here again with more ARPA stuff. So, as you all know, we're moving forward with the implementation of our $26.4 million from the American Rescue Plan Act. And I've brought before you a few policies, and I've been working with Chris to draft a few more policies. So, for now, these are two more. I think will be good for a little while after this. So the record retention policy is again just to satisfy federal uniform guidance requirements. The requirements from the federal government require that any documents related to ARPA funding, how we expend the funds, and anyone involved, any documents are basically retained for 5 years. So we're just putting into writing that we will agree to do that. So we ask for the approval of this policy just to ensure that we'll properly maintain the documents meeting federal requirements. So I don't know. I can go ahead and go into the second one too, the non-discrimination policy, just another one to be in compliance. So basically this just ensures that any projects relating to or using ARPA funds are done so considering non-discrimination and civil rights. So basically, Section 3 of this policy establishes a reporting and enforcement process to ensure that if any individuals involved with, any contractors, anyone involved with any of our ARPA projects, that they can report any instances of unfair treatment to our HR department and or the county manager. So again, we just ask the approval of this policy to be in compliance with federal guidance and ensure that we are completing these projects fairly and equally. So yeah, those are the two policies.
Any questions or comments about this proposed policy?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. I'm glad to see that you're moving forward on it, providing that we vote for it.
Okay. Seeing no opposition, we will go ahead and add it to the consent agenda for approval.
Great. Thank you. So the next one is a little bit of a different pace. So basically, we're asking approval of a grant project ordinance to establish a budgeting process for the implementation of ARPA funds. Adopting this ordinance will allow the county to document the allocation of funds to each project on just one running document. So when the funds are ready to be allocated to each project, then we will present an amendment, and your approval of each amendment will add that as a line item, which brings us to the next item. Again, we have kind of two documents in this one agenda item. So the first amendment to the grant project ordinance is to allocate $10 million basically to move to the general fund. So earlier this year, you all approved an ARPA funding plan, or maybe it was 2021, I don't remember. But you approved an ARPA funding plan that included electing to take the standard allowance of $10 million in the lost revenue replacement category, and using that $10 million to reimburse the county for staff salaries. So then we can use that displaced funding for a wider range of projects, as allowed through ARPA federal policies. So adopting this first amendment to the grant project ordinance will give Kimberly, our finance officer, authority to move these funds from the ARPA special revenue fund to the general fund. And then when it's time to move forward with projects such as the Riverside project and other projects that we're planning to use displaced funds for, then Kimberly will ask for authorization to move those funds to a new project fund. So I'm willing to answer any questions. I know I've been throwing a lot of funding and projects words out.
Questions or comments?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to know that if these funds, if we set them aside, when our manager have some projects or whatever, he will come back and inform the board as to where the money is going. Or what
Correct.
has been done with that money.
Right. Once we pay out on a project, we'll bring forward a documentation as it relates to the actual funds spent on the project versus what we initially budgeted for based on your approval. And so we'll outline that. That will give us a new running total as to what we have available, both in the 10 million that can be spent on any project and the 16.4 million that is spent on ARPA eligible type projects. So we're waiting on some of those items to actually come to final conclusion. We haven't heard on a couple of state grants as it relates to broadband, and we're getting final numbers as it relates to the Viper radio project and a couple of other things, the fiber across the river project that was approved and so on. So we're getting closer to some of those projects actually having final numbers, and so we'll bring forward something. Also hoping that in January, early February, we can look at a list of projects that we would like to designate the remainder of the funding that wasn't already designated by the board, that we can give project targets for that funding as well.
Thank you. That you answered my question.
If I may, remind me again, what is our deadline on this money?
December 31, 2024, it has to be encumbered,
Okay.
obligated for a project, and then has to be spent by December 31 of 2026.
Okay.
So that's why, like, for example, Harnett Regional Water's major project that they're working on, that fits within the timeline. We hope to have that bid sometime late 23, I think is what Steve said. So hopefully we'll have that obligated at that point. So everything's falling into place the way we want at this point. We don't see any concerns related to our timelines. But that's part of the reason I want to designate the rest of the funding in the early part of 23 so that we have 18 months or better to actually obligate that money.
Thank you.
And just a point of clarification, the $10 million that this amendment will move to the general fund, that actually doesn't have a timeline because it'll just be considered part of our general fund. So the Riverside project and the other supplanted projects, we can
That
spend whenever.
displaced money won't have a.
Right.
Correct.
Good clarification.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Any opposition to approving this? Add it to the consent, please.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ward.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Every quarter, we're asked by our auditors to write off a certain percentage of our delinquent accounts. This was probably started about 15 years ago, normal routine task. So we go back 3 years, look at the accounts that are in delinquent status we haven't been able to collect. And by the way, we use a collection agency and various means to try to collect those debts. But every quarter we'll come before you and ask for a certain amount of those delinquent accounts to be written off. So that's what I'm here for today, to ask that to be added to the consent agenda. It's a fairly routine task, and I'll be coming before you every 3 months for that. Those are before you. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
What's the total on this?
Total is $14,675.
I found it, thank you.
Okay.
So even though we write this off, if I understand this correctly, still efforts to collect it down the road?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And we do collect quite a bit of it coming back, because a lot of these accounts are transient accounts. They're rental accounts. So, when that individual or family comes back to rent other property, they're in our system, so we know, and we go back and get this money. And the same thing for problem accounts. Sometimes owners will have issues, then they'll come back and want to rent property later or get it upgraded to rent, and they need water or sewer service. And again, we're able to collect some of these debts, even though they're technically written off on the books.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Trout, you and I had talked about possibility of doing this twice a year instead of quarterly. You want
Yeah,
to?
that's what I was proposing, but I'll have to talk to the auditor based on Steve's comments, and if they're pushing that we keep it at a quarterly basis, and that's what they prefer or recommend, then we may continue with the quarterly. Obviously, it is procedural, so it's just a matter of figuring out what the auditors prefer to see out of us.
And again, this arose from a comment to a CAFR by, it probably wasn't even the same auditors. And I'm not suggesting that we don't continue to do it, but that may be an option to go to, less frequent write-offs. Our auditors may be fine with that now.
June and December,
Yeah, something
every
like
6. You want to,
I'll follow up.
you follow up and report back to us? Okay. Any other questions about this write-off? Is everyone agreeable with it? Consent agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. All right, Mr. Hall.
So I spent many hours on this trying to figure out how to make it not boring, but it is. Sorry. So this is just a policy on how Harnett County maintains electronic records and what to do with them, what to do with the paper, if there's any, after it's digitized. I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff. It also addresses how items that are being filed are filed appropriately, how items are maintained appropriately, who has access to the files, how we track who has access to the files and how they're being accessed, how the system's being backed up regularly, and who maintains the records and makes sure the records are available for use. Pretty straightforward stuff. Melissa Capps has put it to our people over at the NC Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. They've already approved it. It's just a matter of us approving it and putting it on our books. There's really nothing complicated here. So if you have any questions about it, be glad to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Hall? Is everyone in agreement to go ahead and approve this new policy?
Yes.
Oh, we'll put it on the consent agenda for approval then.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Hall. All right, Mr. Appel.
Good morning, Board. Here before you today regarding the property on Monroe Lane. If you recall, on September 6, 2022, you adopted a resolution authorizing the conveyance of the property upon the upset bid procedures. Ms. Pamela White was the interested party who wanted to purchase the property. So that resolution was adopted, and we received the required payment, a down payment. And thereafter, we posted a notice in the Daily Record for the required 10-day upset bid period, and we did not receive any upset bids for this property. And so the final number for this property is $14,520, which is the current value, tax value of that land. Therefore, I have drafted a special warranty deed that Ms. White has already reviewed, and therefore I would just be requesting put this on the consent agenda to be signed, and we will hold, if approved by the board, we'll hold the deed until we receive the final payment for the property, at which time we'll give her the deed and she can record it and it'll become her property. But any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So you need us to approve moving forward?
Yes, just approve the deed. I would just ask to be able to put it on the consent agenda for approval to issue a deed to Ms. White.
Any questions for Mr. Appel? Okay, we'll add it to the consent agenda then.
Okay, thank you very
sir.
much.
All right, Mr. Trout.
Thank you, Chair. This item is an item related to the fact that we now have the actual costs for construction of the terminal project and then our estimated costs for engineering, and it establishes conveyance. So these figures that you have before you modify the existing project ordinance, and that's what we're asking you to do, is basically approve this project ordinance and replacing the one that was previously approved.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none. Since it appears the consensus of the board is to approve it, we'll add it to the consent agenda for approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I think item 12 is yours also, Mr.
Yes.
Trout.
Item 12, through discussion with board member, it was brought up the idea of possibility of us discontinuing our membership in the Southeast Economic Development Commission. So from that discussion, there are a couple of issues that I want to point out. We had a PowerPoint presentation done by our economic development, Kristen Lockamy, describing what SEDC does for us a few months ago. As we've looked at it, we currently pay $12,021 per year to be a member of SEDC. The primary use that we've had in the past with SEDC is to have them assist us related to the filing of Economic Development Administration, which is a federal organization, filing for their grants. There is a process that is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. There's a letter that states that we're part of a CEDS that then allows us to gain additional points in our applications for EDA. As we've looked at it, there are a number of considerations, but just basically, at the request, putting it out there for you all to discuss related to this continuing membership.
Any questions from the board?
Well, I know there've been some discussions on and off around this topic since I've been a part of this board, and I guess my question would be, are we benefiting, is our benefit equal or more than the 12,000, whatever we're paying in dues annually?
It would be hard to determine whether or not it ends up being based on the fact of when we might make an EDA application and be successful. It's been a number of years since we received our last grant, and obviously we would need to, if the board would take this action, the other part that I didn't mention was that I'll be looking for another organization for us to marry with, so to speak, to join, that would be, we would be then able to be a part of a CEDS. I think that that's going to be important for us down the road. But one of the things that I mentioned in the letter is there's a 2-year time frame before we can actually leave the organization. So in that next 2-year period, I will need to look for an organization for us to be a member of that will allow us to get those additional points when we make an application. It's one thing to file an application, but it's another thing to, we need to have those additional points to give ourselves a better chance of being successful. So that would be, if the board were to take this action, that would then also trigger me to look for another organization. And there are some in the area that we might be able to be a part of, but I wouldn't take that action until I knew the board wanted to lead this organization.
And I believe you've spoken with Justin Hembry
Yes,
about this.
Yes.
And he believes there's other organizations that we could.
Yeah, there are the possibility of other organizations that we can consider joining, Triangle J and a couple of others that are a part, and we can make a petition, so to speak, to be a part of those organizations. No guarantee they would accept us, but it would be something that we could pursue. It's important to know that if we do decide to leave the SEDC and 2 years comes and we actually do that, if we desire to join them again, we could petition to join back into the SEDC. They then would have to vote, the rest of the members of the SEDC would have to vote unanimously to allow us to join again. And you're allowed to rejoin once. If you leave a second time, you are not allowed back in SEDC per their bylaws.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we ever pulled out? Is this the first time we're talking about pulling away, right?
This is the first time that we are considering it. We were informed that Cumberland County did pull out at one time, but joined back up.
But they went back in.
Yeah, they went back in.
Let me ask you this question. I have heard Christian talk about the advantages, the advantage of us belonging to this organization, and what this organization could bring to Harnett County. And if I would say jobs to Harnett County. We're in a critical condition for jobs in this county.
Right.
Tell me what advantage it would be for us to pull out. That's what I want to know. I have heard the advantage for us staying in, but I haven't heard any advantage of us just pulling out when we do have a critical problem here in Harnett County with recruiting jobs for the citizens that work here, that live here. So what is the advantage of us pulling out? That's what I want to know. It can't be the money.
Well, I don't know that there is a big advantage one way.
But then why are we doing this? Why are we moving in this direction?
I don't know that we are. This is a discussion item for the board to
Well, if you
figure out.
propose it, if you are proposing it, the board is probably going to vote in favor. I'm on one vote, but I just want to know what is the advantage for us.
Well, if I understand correctly, and Mr. Lockamy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but SEDC does not recruit, or they do not have a program to bring jobs to any of the communities. They will help you get funding if you need it to build a
understand all of
building
that.
or something like that. But
I understand that.
we're a member of RTRP, which their function is to help bring jobs to their member counties.
I know. I mean, we've been a member of that organization ever since I've been on this board. I seen nothing they done for Hunter County.
You're talking about RTRP?
RTRP.
Well,
I seen nothing that they
sometimes you
have
have
done.
to ask.
Yeah, but I'm asking now. I want to know what is the advantage. I mean, what have they done for us? Since you speaking out on it, tell me what RTRP has done for us.
Well,
I mean, I've gone to the meetings, gone to get up 4 days, go to the breakfast and all of that, in hopes that they would consider Harnett County. But they're not, no one don't seem to be considering us.
well, we have nothing to offer anybody right now in the way of buildings availability and that type of thing. And companies that are looking to relocate are typically looking for a already built building, if I understand correctly, Mr. Lockamy. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, two different things really. One, the RTRP really engages in the recruitment and expansion of companies. The SEDC district and organization is our path to EDA grant funding. And so occasionally a county or a local government has the ability to help aid in expansion, pulling in EDA dollars. And so you've got both. You've got the recruitment over there with RTRP, and then you've got the SEDC that can help sponsor EDA applications for municipalities and counties to be able to expand water, sewer systems, things of that nature, to be able to add growth to the community.
I understand all of that. I mean, I've been involved with this stuff for some years now. But I still don't understand the advantage of us pulling out.
Well, one advantage is that 12,000 and how much?
$21. $21. 12,021.
$12,021 a year that we're paying to be a member, and we don't use them. When was the last time we applied for an EDA grant?
Wasn't it for the Brightwater project?
That was
How many years ago was that?
well, less than a decade, but there's been others some municipalities that I presented on recently when I gave the presentation that had applied and received funding within the last 10 years.
So we've had some municipalities, but for us, it was the Brightwater project was the last project that we received money.
And there are other organizations that we can get to help sponsor us if we apply for an EDA grant that we don't have to spend $12,000 a year to be a member of.
What are those organizations?
Ma'am?
What are those organizations?
I think one of them, from my conversations from Justin Hembry, possibly would be Triangle J, Council of Government.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, but I just want to understand the advantage of us
Right.
pulling out, and it can't be just the money, and that's what I'm saying.
That's a good question.
I don't care what it takes. I want to see something come to Harnett County besides rooftops.
I don't disagree with you. I think everybody on this board is in agreement with that statement.
Thank you.
So, if I may, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's important to us to be aligned with some organization that can help us when and if we apply for grants to have the points that go along with that to improve our standing in receiving that grant.
Correct.
So, Mr. Lockamy, if I might put you on the spot, in your opinion, do you think there would be an advantage for us to look at another organization that we would benefit from more than we would with this organization? And let me just say this. I understand we've probably not used them a lot, but let's face it, there's not been a lot happening around here either. And I think we're at the point that we're ready to see that change, so maybe we're going to use them more in the future. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you could just share your opinion with me on that, thank you.
I can see both sides of it. And so when I gave the presentation recently, we looked at the geography of how the Council of Governments are formed in North Carolina and the economic development districts throughout North Carolina. And typically you see the COGs share that same boundary. That's not the case in our area, though. You've got 3 different COGs with 1 EDA district boundary. And so it's awkward. Harnett is somewhat of an awkward fit in the northern part. What happens necessarily south of us is that we're not entirely 100% connected to, as connected as the other communities that have a smaller region. Okay, so that's one of the things I'd say. The downfall, I think, is that if we lose our consistent tie to that EDA funding before we have something else secured, I'm worried that it will hurt our chances if we're trying to get a new industrial park going to be able to provide half the funding for it through infrastructure improvement. Typically, you'll have organizations like USDA and Golden Leaf looking at the others, what they're funding, and then they're putting up funds as a result of that. So the EDA has always been a critical component to economic development infrastructure needs in communities. I would just say if we can find a way to maintain that tie to EDA funding, doing it with another organization, then that satisfies our needs.
So if we were to decide to go in this direction, I believe Mr. Trett said we are aligned with Southeastern for another 2 years. During that time, I guess the proposal would be that we would research what other options might be out there. If we didn't find an option that we thought was better, we could always rescind that and stay with Southeastern. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That would be the plan.
And I think, I think one thing that Mr. Lockamy mentioned, Golden Leaf. Golden Leaf is, they're more than willing to work with Harnett County, or any county really, but Harnett County, on infrastructure, land development, their thing. And this is where Golden Leaf has not been able to participate in the past, in that Harnett County didn't own any land. We have to have control of the land or own the land before they will entertain getting involved financially with a grant.
I'm good. I think I understand
I'm good too.
where we are with this.
So, what's the wishes of the board? Do we put this on Monday night's agenda for discussion? Do we put it on the consent agenda to move forward with withdrawal from SCDC?
Mr. Chair, I would prefer that we put this as if we're going to put it on the agenda, we put it on as a standalone item, so that I'd like to have a little more time to look in and research and talk and think a little bit, rather than putting it on the consent agenda would be my suggestion.
I agree with him.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you'll add that to the agenda. All right, item 13, Mr. Trout, I believe that's yours.
Thank you. So, sent you this item separately. So, Talbert and Bright is one of our engineers of record, along with Parrish and Partners, who's an additional engineer of record. Currently, Talbert and Bright is assigned the Jetport Apron project and the Jetport Terminal project. Parrish and Partners has been assigned the master plan for us. Apron project is currently under construction by Zachary Construction, with Talbert and Bright performing the contract administration. The Jetport Terminal project was designed by Talbert and Bright and has been awarded to Jackson Builders. And that project meeting for kickoff is coming up. So, Commissioner requests that I place this item on the work session agenda for discussion concerning termination of work authorization for Talbert and Bright as it relates to the Jetport Terminal project. So there are two reasons we can terminate that contract, either by termination of default or termination of convenience. In this situation, it would be considered for termination of convenience as it relates to this project. I guess the last item I had was that, let's see, the plans as it relates to, this was brought forward in the previous discussions that were held related to this project, that the plans are, we will have copies of the plans, but we would not have ownership, and there would be not a way to indemnify, we would have to indemnify and hold harmless the Talbert and Bright as it relates to anything that would occur with relation to the project. So we have the authority by termination of convenience to be able to eliminate, to remove this project from the work, and then we would need to seek a work authorization approval for hiring Parish and Partners to move forward with the contract administration for construction of the terminal project.
There's also a recommendation from the advisory board that they would like to see Talbert and Bright terminated.
Yeah, I do understand. I have heard comments and discussion regarding some discontent, I guess would be a way to say, for Talbot and Bright and the progress that has been being made at the Jetport. I also know that they do have the design. They did draw the plans for the terminal. So I guess what is, other than, oh, and let me back up. I also am not surprised that there might, if we're employing two different engineers in various phases in the airport, that there might be some friction that would occur there. But I feel like comment that I hear most often is that Talbot and Bright just seems to be dragging their feet on moving forward on a number of things. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what I hear. So I guess my question would be, what negative would come other than this part about the indemnity that would go along with using those plans to build a terminal, which I think we're well on the way to do. What other negatives would be possible coming from that, if any?
Well, I think the biggest thing you'd have is you'd have another engineer that would be administering a project using a set of plans that they were not the one that designed. And so there'd be a lot of work that they would need to do to review those plans to ensure they understand the specifications as they were and get up to speed. A potential benefit might be is if they found something that they would recommend tweaking, changing, they could make those recommendations at that point. So it could become a benefit, but to start with, it's something that would be additional work for them to accomplish in the process.
Let me clarify something, if I may.
Let me ask one more question. So if they did that, then they went through, worked through it, tweaked anything they felt like they needed to tweak, then would they be accepting that responsibility for some third party claim that should come along?
I think that's a possibility, depending on the changes they might make. If they made changes, then obviously any changes they make, they're putting their stamp on at that point.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Let me clarify something. You made a comment about friction between Parish and Partners and Talbot and Bright. There is no friction between them. Parish and Partners has had no conversations with Talbot and Bright. Parish and Partners has not asked the airport committee to get rid of Talbot and Bright and make them the engineering firm of record on this project. So I want to clarify that.
That's correct.
There's not any friction between the two companies. Parish and Partners has stayed at arm's length throughout the whole discussion. In fact, most of the time when the discussion was held, Parish and Partners was not even in the room. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
Commissioner Nichols,
correct.
you were
Yeah.
there.
It's, I mean, I would say the friction comes between Talbot and Bright, and, just heck, the whole design process. I mean, it's almost been, you know, nightmare. I mean, I hate having my hands held behind my back trying to do something, and it's just excuse after excuse, one thing after another. And I mean, timelines that they're given, I mean, it almost seems like they're dragging their feet for, you know, their own agenda, I would say, instead of, you know, being there for the county and like being there to work for us.
So what I'm hearing is there may be friction from Talbot and Bright, but none from Parish and Partners?
The friction is between Talbot and Bright and the Airport Advisory Board, as much as anything.
Yeah.
So we do have friction.
Pardon me?
So we do have friction.
Well, there's friction between the advisory board and Talbot and Bright.
So we do
Yeah.
have friction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One other thing, prime example, Mr. Trout met with Talbot and Bright, with the engineer from Talbot and Bright, about where to locate the temporary terminal. And she kept arguing with him, and they went around about 3 times, and finally he stood up and said, "It's gonna be here." We shouldn't have, I mean, what part of the fact that we are the client does she not get? And when I say she, I'm including the rest of Talbot and Bright. They do not understand that we're the client, we have the call, not them.
So that's the reason for the consideration of making this change, because of the friction between the Airport Advisory Committee and Talbot and Bright. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I would prefer this question to Mr. Calder Price. This change, and I feel like we have had this discussion before. Back here in the summertime, we had this discussion about these two engineering companies. Will this move set us back? That's what I want to know. If it's going to set us back, that means we're going to be spending more money to finish these projects. And Mr. Price, can you answer that question for me? Setting us back, because I know that this Talbot and Bright, they have already did some discovery and moved forward on a lot of things that we need there at that airport in order to finish this project. That's what I'm saying. This project's been going on for about 2 years now. Change engineers or whatever in the midstream, will that set us back as far as moving this project forward and not cost us more and more money? That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, I'm not sure that we can specifically answer that question. Does it have the potential to? Yes, it could. It all depends on how it moves forward as far as the analysis of the work that's done as Parish and Partners digs into it. And then there's a possibility there may be some issues with Department of Aviation, but we can determine based on our own decision whether to terminate the contract.
You're saying it could cause us some problems?
Well, we don't know. I mean, and we haven't had a discussion with the Department of Aviation about the change in the engineering firms. And so that is something that we would end up doing. But Parish and Partners, if we choose them, they're already engineer of record for us as it relates to this project. And so that we would need to give them that and they would begin to get started. The plans and specs are done. The contractor can begin work. We should have a signed contract by them sometime this week.
Can I say something? I mean, I'm not speaking for the airport committee advisory board, but sitting in those meetings and listening to this go on, I think the hope and expectation of making this change would be so that Parish and Partners will expedite this and move this along a lot faster than what Talbot Talbot and Bright has been doing, to where it feels like we've been restricted and limited and held back. So as far as it holding us back, I think the main goal here and the reason for doing this is so we aren't being held back and we're able to go ahead and make advances on the terminal as the clients want them to be done. So, I mean, this is huge for all of us. I mean, we're putting a lot of eggs into this basket, and we want it done right and want it done a certain way. And I think the hope is going to be that it will advance instead of hold us back.
Well, that's what I'm interested is that we advance and move this project forward. Because if it's going to hold us back and it's going to cost us more money, because you all were talking about getting the engineer to draw another terminal, engineer another terminal and all that kind of stuff.
No. With factoring this
You done
in,
moved off of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Yes, ma'am.
It seems like we're stepping backwards instead of moving forward.
In other words, instead of Talbot and Bright running this construction job, it'll be Parrish and Partners. Talbot and Bright will be out of the picture on it.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but I'm at the point now, I just don't want to see us continue to pour money into a project that's not moving anywhere.
you know how I am.
If you ask Talbot and Bright, what's the completion date of this terminal? They will tell you February or March of '24.
It's March 31 of 2024 is completion date.
If you ask the contractor when he can have it built, he'll tell you 12 months. If he starts in December of this year, he anticipates having it done in December of '23. That's the difference right there. Or one difference.
Okay.
I will say my personal opinion after, if you take everything into consideration, my personal opinion is that we are being held back with Talbot and Bright.
Yeah.
And if we make this decision, we are making there could be things that we could run into and not see. However, the hope is there for us to move forward and get this done quickly and efficiently. So.
I don't mean to ask so many questions and all, but I gotta understand, we're spending taxpayers' money here, and we're
You feel
spending
free to
federal
ask all the
government,
questions
federal
you
government's
want to.
dollars too. What is the board's input in this? I mean, which direction is the board of directors going?
You're talking about
The airport board of
the
directors.
airport board? They're in favor of making this change. The airport advisory board is in favor of making this change.
But that's what I want to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Nickel, I appreciate those comments. I know you and Commissioner Witherspoon sit on that committee, so y'all have been involved in the discussions in the front line, but that does fit in with what I'm hearing as well, that the prevailing thought is that the project's been dragged along rather than go ahead and trying to be moved along and progress as quickly as possible. So thank you for sharing.
So what would be the consensus of the board at this point?
If we're going to put it on the agenda for next time, I would also like to see this as a separate item.
Okay. We'll add it as an item to the agenda. Okay, applications for boards and committees. We have, I think you have a handout at your desk, the Harnett County Public Library Board of Trustees. We have Ms. Dottie Womack, who was the District 4 rep. She has resigned and reapplied to serve on the board as the Boone Trail representative, which that's District 4. I concur. In fact, I talked with Angela, and Angela helped get that done. That being said, we have an application from Ethan Alexander Davey. I don't know if you've read his application or not, but Mr. Davy has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was vice president for 2 years and then president for another 2 years of the Friends of the Library at Campbell. He served on the Andrew Library Board from 2021 until it was dissolved. He brings a lot of knowledge and experience to our library board, and I would have no problem in recommending him to be approved as the District 4 rep. So unless there's an objection from the board, I'm going to ask Madam Clerk to add the library board, the Harnett County Public Library Board of Trustees to the consent agenda for approval. Okay. We have also the Tourism Development Authority. We have a resignation by Ricky Ray, who is no longer in Harnett County. He's no longer at Campbell. He now works for William and Mary. So we need to accept his resignation. And we have an application for reappointment from a Mr. Smirnov to this board. And I personally am not in favor of reappointing Mr. Smirnov.
What district is this? District? What district?
I don't know. He runs the kayak and canoe place down.
Okay.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
what is this district, this appointment is for? For district,
It
this
would be,
for county?
I'm sorry, it says it's business/tourism related specific.
So it's no district related to?
It's not a district.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
That's a good question. So it would be a business person that is needed.
Okay.
But I'm just expressing my opinion. You know, it's up to the rest of the board.
With the resignation, if that's your sentiments on that, I will agree with you. I don't have any opposition against it.
So help me make sure I'm clear. So the recommendation, Chairman Witherspoon, would be to accept resignation of Ricky Ray.
Mhm.
And is that it, or also the application from Yvonne Berdovich?
Okay, concerning Mr. Smirnov.
Right, I got that. I was just looking at the
Yeah,
other one.
yeah, oh, yes, sir. It would be, I would recommend that we accept Ricky Ray's resignation and that we accept Mr. Budrovic, if it's the pleasure of the board.
I'm fine with that.
As far as Mr. Smirnoff, I was stating
Understand?
an opinion.
Well, and that's, that's something that we can talk about and review. We don't have to necessarily add it for next meeting, so.
Right, okay. You know what we want now?
Yes.
Consent agenda for Ricky Ray's resignation and Mr. Budrovic
Gotcha.
appointment. And we will bring Mr. Smirnoff up at a later time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Ms. McFadden, talk to us about the CIP program.
Good morning. Last week, you received the county manager's recommended improvements program for fiscal year 24 through 30. And today we'll go through those projects, and it is pretty lengthy because we do have a lot to discuss. So I'm hoping if you have any questions or anything you want more clarification on as we go through it, please stop me, because I want this to be sort of interactive so you understand what we're discussing here. We'll do a quick review of the CIP process on how we got to where we're at. We'll go through the funding strategy, the reader's guide action summary, and our projects, and we'll go through our next steps. So having a CIP in North Carolina is not required, but if we do, the county manager is responsible for the preparation. And as a board, you will adopt project ordinances and establish capital reserve funds, and that's something you already do now anyways. In order for projects to be budgeted, we have to budget projects before we can spend any money on them. And we do that in 3 ways. In the CIP, it's broken up over a 7-year period. And we'll take that year 1 and we'll put that into the operating budget when we get ready to plan for that in the spring. Or we can budget it during the operating budget anytime throughout the fiscal year, or through a project ordinance, and we usually do those when they expand or they span more than 1 fiscal year. So a CIP, it's basically, we get all our projects that cost $100,000 or more in one place, and that helps us to plan and budget for our capital needs over the next 7 years. And our CIP includes all our departments except for Harnett Regional Water, and theirs is separate because theirs is a 10-year plan. Ours also includes Harnett County Schools in Central Carolina Community College. We update our plan annually in the fall, but it can be modified at any time because it is just a plan. Our CIP requests are submitted by the departments in September, and then each new project is vetted by department heads that can provide additional guidance to move the projects forward. Each project is then reviewed by the management team and ranked and prioritized. Our CIP projects are based on today's dollars, and then we inflate them throughout the years. So for example, anything that's non-construction items, it can be anywhere from 3 to 5%, and construction anywhere from 6 to 10. And with inflation the way it is right now, we've basically adjusted these on the higher end because with construction costs, we're not 100% sure of what these costs will be. We want to make sure that all our recommended projects have a funding source has been identified. And if it hasn't, we're going to consider that a future project. And so if we don't have a funding source or a scope or a cost estimate, that's why we have identified those as future projects. We also want to make sure we have a funding strategy. We want to make sure that we are maximizing grants. We want to reserve our debt capacity for multi-million-dollar capital projects like schools. We estimate our operating costs so we have a better idea of how it was going to affect our overall operating budget in the future years. We want to set aside money each year for upcoming projects, and we want to continue to contribute to the capital reserve funds for to help pay for future capital items. On page 12 of the document, you'll find our funding summary, and this chart just shows how the funding sources of the CIP projects per year. On page 14, it's the operating impact, and this table just shows how the recommended projects will affect the operating budget over the next 7 years. On page 5 is the reader's guide, and this just describes each section of the projects and what each section of it means. The action summary, this shows how we'll be looking at the projects during the presentation. It's based on the level of the discretion as a board that you have to change the items. And in April, the Board of Education submitted a list of their facility needs to the board. And on page 2, it's a table of how the CIP is going to address these needs. And going forward, this is something new that we have done. Now that we have a strategic plan in place, we want to tie each one of our capital projects going forward to a strategic goal. And that's what we have done here is we've identified which strategic goal these projects fall under. And tomorrow we'll actually kick off our performance management program, so we'll be able to monitor this as years go on. Are there any questions before we jump into the projects? Okay. So for the completed projects, we want to make sure that you have an idea of, or to see the closure of the project. So in the, how they've done from the beginning to the end, the total cost, whether or not they were on budget, over budget. But for the completed projects, these will include those that were completed in both fiscal year 22 and 23. So on page 15, you'll see this table, and it shows those that were completed in by June 30th of 2022. The bottom 3, even though those were completed in the prior fiscal year, I've included those on some slides because when we did the presentation in February, those projects were still ongoing, so I just wanted you to see the closure of those projects. Central Carolina Community College, their parking lot resurfacing, it's on page 24. It was completed in March. It came in about $8,600 over budget because the cost of paving went up. Our fleet management and replacement system, that is, we are now self-sustaining as of fiscal year 2023. This plan, it was a 5-year plan to self-lease our vehicles. And over the 5 years, we have purchased 30 vehicles and are leasing them back to the departments at a rate of $120,000. So at this point in time, this program is self-sustaining, so we don't have to fund this project going forward. Harnett County Schools, Irwin Elementary, it's on page 38. This school opened in April of 2022. The project is complete, but they're still working just through some of their warranty and punch list items. The Harnett County Sheriff's Office, the Detention Center Security Intercom replacement on page 46. This project came in on budget, and it was completed in May of 2022. The Harnett County Sheriff's Office in-car camera system starts on page 48. This was approved in last fiscal year's budget, and it was funded through the asset forfeiture funds, and it was completed in August of this year. The Harnett Regional Jetport Airfield Lighting Rehabilitation. This was funded through grants and capital reserves, and it was almost $1.6 million. The project began in April of 2021, and the construction part was completed in March of this year. It wasn't closed until August of 2022 when the grant agreement was closed. And our social services and commons area roof replacement, that was completed under budget in April of this year. Do y'all have any questions on our completed projects? Okay.
Don't hear it.
Okay, then we will move right along. The next set of projects are contract let projects, and these are projects that have been approved in a prior year CIP or by another action such as approved in the operating budget or through a project ordinance. Since contracts have already been executed, you may have little discretion on what to change, but you can postpone any future phases. The first one is broadband expansion. Okay, Ira's not here, so I was hoping he could give us a little bit more updated information, but I'm going to read to you where we're at on this project because there's a lot to cover, and I know this is an important project. So as of September 20 of this year, the Lillington Tower and Oak Ridge Tower have been turned on and are functioning. Camp Agape is now receiving broadband services from Cloudwise through the Oak Ridge Tower location. The first wireless and fiber customers were expected to receive service from these towers by the end of October. The Bowie's Creek and Andrew towers are expected to be turned up and functioning by the end of December. With the completion of these two towers, phase 1 of the fixed wireless project will be complete. Cloudwise was awarded the 2022 GREAT grant for Harnett County. Cloudwise also applied for an $8 million grant which would provide broadband services to over 2,700 locations. The State Broadband Office is expected to release the final awarded amount and eligible locations any day now. The state is also offering another grant opportunity through the CAB program, and more information on that is coming out soon. The statement of work for phase 2 of the fixed wireless project has been requested from Cloudwise, and Harnett County has allocated $2 million of the American Rescue Plan funds to continue with the next phase of the wireless project. So we're still waiting to hear any day now on how much money was awarded in that grant fund.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Do you have an idea of where Cloudwise and where they're setting up? I know they got a tower here in Littleton, but in the other surrounding areas, where they're setting up their
I know that's what I was hoping Ira was here for. Do you have an update on that? Because I know that
The first customer in Lillington has been signed up and is active. And there'll be more customers that as their teams, they're hiring people to go out and look for customers. In other words, they're hiring the marketing people to begin that process for signing up customers, and we'll begin that process. Well, it's actually ongoing right now. When they received their grant, but the process through the Department of Information Technology at the state has been slow as far as implementation of the GREAT grant. So that part of the project that they have has not started. We will begin working with them on approval of phase 2 contracts here in the near future so that we can begin the second phase of the project, which was also authorized through the GREAT grant fund, or through the ARPA funding. So
I know some setups out in the northwest Harnett area. Cloudwise is already in that particular area. What about the western Harnett and other rural parts of this county?
right, so that is part of phase 2. The western Harnett County area is part of phase 2.
That's part 2.
Right, so things south of the river is the best way to explain it, was part of phase 2. So there are towers on the north side now of Cape Fear River. The next phase is the south side of Cape Fear River to begin to look at the placement of towers and putting the equipment on towers. But you're looking at, I would say, you're probably a year down the road before we're going to have western Harnett done based on. Now, I will say it will likely go much faster than it did the first time around. Cloudwise has learned a lot as they've done the implementation of this project. So, excuse me. So there's, I think, some opportunity for it to go a little bit faster than the last time.
I got one more question. I'm sorry to hold you up.
No, you're good.
The tower's been set up down here at Edward Brothers Road. Okay, how far does that stretch out to the community?
That's a question I have to get information from Cloudwise on. I'm not familiar with the distance that reaches, but I'll find out what the radius is from that tower.
I'm asking that question because citizens are asking these questions. But this has been a project that, you know, I am glad to see it moving forward, but it's been a project that's been on the minds of all the commissioners for many, many years now. Thank you.
The old jail demo and demolition and relocation of building services is on page 33. This project is ongoing right now. It began in January of this year and it's expected to be completed in December of this year. It was held up because there was an unforeseen electrical issue that postponed this for a little bit, so that's why it's been extended until December. Johnsonville Elementary School Phase 1 expansion and renovation. As of late August, the windows have been installed and completed in Building 1, and as of mid-September, 80% of the site work had been completed. Paving is expected to be completed by the end of November, and substantial completion of the cafeteria is expected to be completed by December. The new Northwest Harnett Elementary School. As of mid-September, the roofing was complete and the geothermal wells had been installed. Currently, storm drains and curbing are being installed and the parking lots are being paved. The targeted completion date is June of 2023 and the targeted opening of the new school is August of 2023. The apron expansion project. This is also funded through grants and capital reserve. It began in September of 2022 and is expected to be completed in April of 2023. The Harnett Regional Jetport Master Plan is on page 54. Parrish and Partners submitted the master plan alternatives and collected feedback from airport end users in mid-October. Parrish and Partners will use these suggestions to customize a final master plan by January of 2023. With the completion date of July of 2023. Parks and Recreation, Ben Haven Community Park redevelopment. It's on page 62. And the demolition has been completed on existing fencing, ball fields, and playground. The grading of the ball fields began in October of 2022. The staff has met with a playground representative to discuss the playground and picnic shelter options. Planned renovations and upgrades should be scheduled to be completed by January of 2023. The Parks and Recreation Shawtown Community Development starts on page 75. The county received an additional $100,325 in funding from the state's budget, which allowed the county to install a larger playground and picnic shelter that was then originally had been planned. The existing parking lot was extended in July of this year, and the playground and picnic shelter were installed in August of 2022. Fencing and signage are expected to be completed as soon as well.
May I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Now, will there be fencing that will separate this playground from the parking lot?
I'm not sure exactly where the fencing is going. We can find out from Carl and let you know.
And
for
that's
sure.
fine, and
Yes.
I know that's kind of off topic, but that made me think of it. I did have somebody that shared with me a concern about a child had run out into the parking lot when the Boys and Girls Club was dismissing or something.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that probably would be wise, but anyway, like I said, I don't mean to derail this, just ask that question.
Last week, I can't remember.
I don't,
I
yeah,
don't think it was.
I don't think there is either. I think
Right, I just, the last time I was out there, there was not. I just wonder if
Yes.
there are plans to do
Yeah,
that.
because we know that it's going to be installed soon. I just don't know the layout of
Right.
where it's
I
going to go.
got you.
And I just want to add, I spoke to Carl about it too. There's still much work out there to be done. Maybe it's on the agenda for later on.
In the tax office billing and collection software replacement, that starts on page 80. And currently, the personal property data conversion is in process and expected to be completed in December. And the collections data conversion will begin in March and is expected to be completed in June of 2023. Do y'all have any questions on those approved contracts before we, or projects before we move to the next set. The next group of projects are projects that do not have a contract. These were either approved in a prior year CIP or by another action. No contracts, purchase contracts, or construction projects have been executed on these, and the manager is recommending these projects. The first one is the emergency Viper radio replacement, and that starts on page 25. In July of 2022, the Board of Commissioners approved the replacement of all Viper radios and allocated a portion of the American Rescue Plan funds to cover the cost of this project. All radios have been delivered, but the chargers and batteries had not yet arrived. Once the radios are supposed to be programmed as of October, and then installation will begin once the programming is complete. The project is anticipated to be completed in February of 2023. This is a great example of a project that we had ready to go when the ARPA funds became available to us. We could go ahead and move up this project and cover the cost of our radios, the fire department radios, the EMS radios. So we were able to cover actually a total of 521 mobile radios and 517 portable Viper radios throughout the county. The next project is the cardiac monitor replacements for EMS. As of right now, there is no change in this project because it's still planned for fiscal year 2027. And we'll replace those monitors at the end of their useful life. The EMS convalescent transport unit replacement, these are the little vans that you see that are used for the transporting people instead of the ambulances. They have a vehicle replacement policy in place, so the EMS department follows they actually replace one vehicle every fiscal year. So what we're looking at is almost $1.2 million over the next 7 years, and it will be funded through the Capital Reserve Fund. The next one is the emergency transport unit replacement, and that starts on page 30. This project is almost $700,000, and it's going to replace a total of 5 units over the next 7 years. And you can see here in which fiscal year that they're requesting these remounts. The next one is the emergency medical services transport unit replacement, and this is to actually replace the ambulance itself. And this is, they're requesting 7 units over the next 7 years, and it will be about $1.6 million. The Harnett County School Maintenance Fund. I work with Steve Matthews with the school system each year to identify what their needs are. But we would like to continue the annual contribution of $1.4 million to their maintenance fund. And each year he prioritizes a list of his needs. And as you can see here, what they plan to do with these funds in fiscal year 24. And as we've stated before, this is just a plan. So if something comes up, these items typically will get bumped. He had a few things that he had to switch around this year because they took priority.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Matthews, it is up. It's right there where the handicap parking's at. It starts right there, goes all the way past the playground, past the pavilion, so it does separate the parking.
Great,
It's
thank you.
split- it's split road.
Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you. The Harnett County Sheriff's Office Capital Reserve Fund. Currently, we contribute $450,000 to the reserve fund to be used for cars and other capital items. This year, or starting in fiscal year 2024, they're asking for an increase of $200,000, which will, if they purchase vehicles, it's only going to cover approximately 5 cars, because each car is at least $40,000. The next one is the Harnett County Sheriff's Office Detention Center Video Surveillance System Upgrade. That project was delayed due to supply chain issues, but it has begun and is expected to be completed by January of 2023. The IT fiber extension project, this was originally scheduled for fiscal year 28, but we moved it to fiscal year 23 because of the ARPA funding. And this project is expected to begin no later than mid-January of 2023 and with a completion date of the end of February of 2023. We'd like for the Parks and Recreation Capital Reserve appropriations on page 67. This is to continue the annual contribution of $200,000 to the Parks and Recreation Fund. These funds are used for Parks and Recreation projects and monetary matches for grant funding. The next one is the Parks and Recreation Greenway Construction Capital Reserve appropriation. And this is an annual contribution of $100,000 to this fund. But for the past 2 years, we've had to cut this allocation to help balance the operating budget. So we'd like to make sure that we put that in there this year. The next one is the Solid Waste Northwest Convenience Center relocation. This project was approved last year and it's currently moving forward with the procurement process. Are there any questions on the projects with no contracts?
Look at that, a Harnett County school with a Sanford address.
So our next section is the approved no contracts or part projects, and that just means part of the contract has been executed. This project was approved in a prior year CIP or by other actions, and the manager is recommending this project. And it's only one, and it's the Ben Haven former school renovation project, and it's on page 17.
It's really coming along out there.
Yes.
Good. It's really good. Different. Yeah.
Very nice parking lot. The construction of the new parking lot on the site was completed in early October. Harnett County Schools plans to open an early college in the gymnasium and attached classroom in January. And county staff is currently working to provide some county services on the campus right now. Last year's CIP included replacing the windows in the 2-story building, but we'd like to hold off on that right now until we come up with a purpose for that 2-story building. We don't want to spend the money if we don't have to yet.
I had a question with that out there.
Okay.
Is there any plans for any additional parking? Because I mean, it doesn't seem like there's
Parking where?
addition out at the old Ben Haven school. I mean, once we start up, hopefully a library and early college and stuff, my concern would be the amount of parking that we have out
I think
there.
we'd want to, I think first we need to see, there's a lot of additional parking that was created because of the demolition of the cafeteria, and you see that large parking lot and that. I think we want to see what the usage is, and then we could determine there's a need to expand it from beyond that, but I'd really like to see if there's enough usage with what we already created. Because that's probably triple what existed before. So let's see where we end up after that.
The next section are our new projects. These projects have not been approved in a previous CIP, so we're including them going forward. They may have been a future project prior to this, or they may have been approved in the current operating budget, and the manager is recommending these projects. We had a total of 15 new ones, and of those, 6 of which are already being funded, but we're adding those to the CIP, and I'll point those out to you. The first one is a capital maintenance and replacement fund for the county. We currently have a reserve fund for this, but we would like to establish an annual contribution of $500,000 beginning in fiscal year 2024. Like the school system, our maintenance department has created a list of needs that they have over the next 7 years, and they have prioritized those as well. And so in fiscal year 24, These funds will address the courthouse roof replacement, the government complex parking lot repavement, and 8 government building parking lots will be resealed. The next one is the Emergency Medical Services, a capital reserve appropriation. Currently, we have a capital reserve fund established for them, but up until this year, we have been paying for their items out of the capital reserve the general capital reserve fund, and we'd like to start putting money in their EMS fund so we can pay for their items out of that fund so we can track it that way. And so if we set up an annual contribution beginning next fiscal year of $690,000 and decrease it to $450 beginning in fiscal year 28, that will cover all their vehicle replacements, remounts, and cardiac monitors over the next 7 years. Harnett County Schools camera upgrades. This is a project that is new to the CIP, but it was approved by the board in September, so it's already underway. This project will replace 475 interior and exterior cameras at 13 schools. The expected completion date is December of 2023, but the supply chain issues could delay this project. The next one is the Harnett County Schools electronic door locks. And again, this one's new to the CIP. It was a future project, but it's already underway as well. And this is going to replace the 55 exterior doors at 17 schools, and it's expected to be completed in May of 2023. The next one is the Harnett Regional Jetport new terminal construction, and that starts on page 55. Jackson Builders was awarded the base bid and bid alternate one with a total construction contract amount of a little over $5.1 million, and the proposed start date is December the 12th of 2022, and the expected completion date of March of 2024. And the county did receive $6 million from the state capital infrastructure funds to help cover the cost of the terminal. The IT core server infrastructure upgrade and replacement is on page 57. This is another project that was approved this past September, but we're adding it to the CIP. The equipment has been ordered and should be delivered this month, and the expected completion date is March of 2023. Parks and Recreation, Anderson Creek Park development of Phase 2. This project will construct over 3.5 miles of mountain biking trails, and this will be funded using the state capital infrastructure funds. The next one is the Boone Trail Park development, Phase 1. Phase 1 will stabilize you can see the entryway monument, and it's estimated about $125,000 to correct that monument. And then going forward, the future phases, some of the things the community would like to see is a walkway, an amphitheater, basketball courts, restroom facility, and walking trails. The next one is the Cape Fear Shiner Park Development Phase 2, and this will construct a playground, picnic shelter, and restroom facility beginning in fiscal year 25, and they'll use Parks Capital Reserve funds to do it. The next one is Parks and Recreation Nils Creek Park Development Master Plan, and then the Park Development Phase 1. So they want to start with the site master plan in fiscal year 23 using the Capital Parks Reserve Fund. And then going forward, once they're expecting some of the improvements may include a new entrance from Highway 210 into the park, a new parking lot, restrooms, and field lighting. The next one is the Nils Creek Park Restroom Concession and Maintenance Building. And this is another new to the CIP project, which is already currently underway. The construction is expected to begin in March of 2023 and should be completed by July of 2023. Next one is the Parks and Recreation Northwest Harnett Park Development on page 73. And this will, the fund a park master plan first in fiscal year 25 and then develop the park starting in fiscal year 27. And I wanted to point out, one of the things that I learned about was a bicycle pump track is one of the things that they want to include. I'd never heard of that, but apparently that's one of the new things that everybody is wanting. And it's a track that you don't really have to pedal. You just get going over the little humps and stuff, and then you just ride on it without having to pedal, or you have very little pedaling. But that's a new thing these days.
Sounds like a broken arm.
So that'd be the first one in Harnett County. Yes. The next one is the Patriots Park Development Phase 3, and that will construct a restroom facility beginning next fiscal year using the State Capital Infrastructure Fund. Right now, they've got a portable toilet out there, and they want to build an actual restroom facility. The next one is something I think everybody needs to go out there and look at, the difference in the Ben Haven Library, the Media Center. Chris Johnson did a great job out there renovating that. And so the library, it's ready for them to move in once we get shelving and everything and the books ordered. But the Ben Haven Branch Library starts on page 77, and this is a little over $400,000 being funded in fiscal year 24. This will host a new branch library out in the western part of the county, and it will also provide space for additional satellite offices that the county can use as well. And it will also help with the early college students with their library services too. The next one is the solid waste wheeled excavator replacement on page 85, and this is funded in this current fiscal year. We're just adding it to the CIP, and it's funded through the solid waste capital reserves. It's going to be purchased this fiscal year, but it may not even be delivered until fiscal year 24. Do you have any questions on the new projects? Good. Okay.
Don't hear anything, continue
All
on.
right. And the next one are our future projects. We're only adding 4 new future projects to the CIP, and we'll talk about those 4 when we get there. And most of these don't really have any changes, but the ones that do, I'll point those out. The Animal Services Shelter Replacement. The project is moving forward, but not to the point of being funded quite yet. A feasibility study was completed in October, and options are still being discussed to determine the new location, building needs, and the cost. The Board of Elections Facility Replacement and Renovations on page 87. The Board of Elections is part of our current space needs study, and we're going to wait until we hear back from Dewberry's recommendations before we move forward with the project. Other than that, there are no changes. Central Carolina Community College, their drainage system repair, there is no change to this project either. CCCC did not request any new capital projects this current year because they're still working through their master plan, but I do expect going forward they may request some next year. The courthouse shell space upfit is on page 88, and the courthouse shell space is also part of the current space needs study, and we'll wait to hear back from Dewberry before we make any recommendations on this project. And other than that, there are no changes. This one's one of the new future projects, and this is for the comprehensive land use plan update. We expect this project to move forward in this current fiscal year, but it's identified as a future project right now because we're still waiting on the scope and the cost of the project. And that should be coming soon. The fleet maintenance and facility improvements or replacement, there's still no change in this project yet. Bowie's Creek Elementary School. The Board of Education has moved this project from a Tier 3 to a Tier 2 project, meaning it's needed in the next 2 to 3 years. And I did want to point out that this was incorrectly listed on the CIP document that I gave you. It was still left at Tier 3, but it has been updated since then to the Tier 2. The next one is the custodial grounds and warehouse replacement on page 90. The Board of Education has deemed this as a Tier 1 project, which means immediate to 1 year. And there's been no change in this project. They're still using the space, the warehouse space over on Alexander Drive. The next one is the Flatwoods Middle School on page 91. This was previously referred to in the previous CIP as the New South Harnett Lillington Middle School. So they've changed the name. And there's no new changes to this project other than that the land has been purchased. The next one is Lafayette Elementary School renovations. Once the students move from Lafayette to the new elementary school, we expect this project to move forward, but at this time, no changes have been made to this project. The next one is the new South Harnett Lillington / Highland High School, and there's been no change in this project either. The next one is the Harnett County Schools Transportation Maintenance Facility Replacement, and there's been no change in this project. The Harnett County Sheriff's Office Detention Center Housing Unit Addition on page 92. There's also been no change in this project. But we do expect it to move forward as we get closer to 2030 because of the amount of inmates we may house. The next one is the Evidence Storage and Crime Scene Processing Bay. There has been no change in this project either. We would still need to find a location for the building. The original place where they had suggested to put the building is actually where the additional unit for the detention center would actually go. So we need to find a new place for this Evidence Storage and Crime Scene Processing Bay. The next one is the generator purchase and installation for the Sheriff's Office. The study was the Dewberry engineers completed a study, but we only received a quote for a replacement generator, but not for an additional one. We're waiting on the cost of the second generator. To have one that would power the entire building would be about $2.7 million. So we're waiting on to purchase a second generator to go along with the current one they have. The next one is the Harnett Regional Jetport fuel tank replacement. And this project is a new future project as well. And this will replace existing tanks to increase fuel capacity and provide a safer working environment. We're waiting for the master plan to be complete to find out what the recommendations are on the fuel tank replacement and the location of them. The Harnett Regional Jetport Hangar Development Project. In last year's CIP, this was a new CIP project, and it was to be funded in fiscal year 2025, but it has now been moved to a future project because we're waiting on the master plan to be completed to find out their recommendations for the hangars. And this is just another example of how this plan can change from year to year depending on other factors that come up. The next one is the Health Department's Mobile Medical Unit. This is a new future project that will be funded in this current fiscal year. It's a future project because we did not have a cost estimate on the mobile unit yet, but it will be 100% grant funded. And it has to be purchased by the end of May. The next one is the HVAC control upgrades and standardization in multiple locations. There's been no change in this project, but now that we are recommending an annual allocation into the Facilities Maintenance Fund, this is one of the items that could be addressed. Next one is the Anderson Creek Park Development, and these are the future phases, which would include the equestrian and walking trails, additional parking, playground, and picnic shelter, and other than that, nothing has changed. Boone Trail Park Development, future phases. There's been no change in the future this future project, other than phase 1 of stabilizing the memorial archway. The next one is Niels Creek Park roadway construction. This has been a future project for a few years, but with the master plan for Niels Creek Park, this could alter where the driveway goes into the school. So we'd like to also wait for the master plan to be complete for Niels Creek Park. The next one is the public library's mobile outreach vehicle. And this could provide library services to currently underserved areas, and there has been no change in this future project. And the next one is a new future project being requested by the library, and this is the radio frequency identification installation in the branches. So right now we have, they call it the RFID, and it's where they tag the books. So when they go in and out of the doors, they know if they've been checked out, so it's better inventory and theft control. And they'd like to put those in all the branch libraries. The next one is the Western Harnett service expansion, and there's been no change in this future project, but we're still gonna wait to see how the Ben Haven Library branch affects the Western Harnett area, and they'll continue to study the needs of that area as well. So are there any questions, anything else you want to discuss in a little bit more detail? I know that was a lot.
Any questions for Ms. McFadden?
I don't have
Seems like
any.
you just did this last year.
I know, it was just in February. It was just like the other day.
I have a question.
Okay.
I know you said that there's been no future dates set for us to deal in a new board of election. When are we going to discuss that?
So they're part of the Dewberry Space Needs Study. So they're actually helping us go through that process
Okay.
of what their needs are going to be, what size they would need, a location that we could possibly put them. They're part of our study right now.
Okay, so they're part of the study.
Yes.
That's good because it is very much needed. We need a new facility there.
Mhm.
And that's all the question I have.
Okay.
And I need to talk to you about providing some restrooms out there for the people,
Yes, ma'am.
for that board of election. It does not make any sense for people to be out there working in this county, in this election, and not have some bathroom facilities to use. So that's something for you and I to discuss later.
Okay.
On, okay?
All right, we'll
Because
talk
you all
about
got to run next time.
We'll talk about that.
And I don't want to see you go through what we had to go through.
Any other comments or questions?
If as you review it, you think of something, please let us know. It's a lot of information. It's a very detailed document. I feel like it continues to be refined even from last year when I first came. As Lisa's gotten into it, she's made changes and improved it, I can see. And so I'm excited that we are really truly identifying what our potential capital projects are and doing a better job of getting them out, and even the ones that she just at the end went through, which are potential projects for the future. Really making sure we identify that we know this is a project we want to consider. We're just not sure where we're going to get funding, when it's going to happen. We know it's a project that should be considered, just like the schools, as we look at the school projects that are coming. That way we're not surprised 3-4 years from now. Yeah, oh yeah, we've been talking about that. Now we're going to be able to pay for it. So lots of good things. Some of these, you may have noticed we made some changes as it relates to a couple of projects. We're able to use some excess bond funding from previous schools since the projects are there on the school grounds, rearranging some of our SCIF funding that we received to move some park projects along. And Coley and Carl will identify some park projects that could qualify for that funding. And so we're able to do some things a little earlier than we thought we would be able to do based on that grant funding. So that's exciting.
Well, I would like to thank you for the hard work. It is so great to have a plan for looking into the future. said, we may not be at a point we'll be able to accomplish all of it, but at least we know it's there and we can work toward that goal. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for that.
I want to say that I appreciate the study, and it tells me that we are moving forward. And I'm glad to see that we are considering schools, building those schools. Believe me, you all see what's happening in this county. We're gonna need more schools way before we find the funding for it because of all these citizens moving into this county. And as I have said more than one time, I say this very often, the average citizen don't understand how we build schools and what it takes for us to build schools. They think that the funding we should sit here and then just agree on the funding and move forward with building schools. Because I heard that they're campaigning this year. So, but I'm very, very, very proud of the fact that we are looking at the future and we are already strategizing how we can get from A to B. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. All right.
So our
Thank you.
next step is public comment on Monday night, and then hopefully the adoption of the CIP on December 5th.
Do you want to do the closed session?
That's all I got.
Do you want to do the closed session or not?
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. Okay, Mr. Trout, County Manager's Report.
Nothing additional. We've covered a lot of items here, so I don't have anything specific we need to mention.
All right, thanks, sir. We do have need for a short closed session, so I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, I move that the board go into closed session for the following purpose: to consult with the county's legal counsel in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege concerning the handling of certain litigation involving the following case: workers' compensation claim of Jennifer Rabba, IC file number 22-030689. This motion is made pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Section 143-318.11A3.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? We are recessed and reconvene in closed session.